Good day. Good vibes. Once you lose the weight, you need to have a little rest period directly after. This allows your body to properly hydrate, replace the needed glycogen in your muscle cells, and go back to a homeostatic balance. After this is done, the weight that you lost, there's a little grace period there. And you will be able to keep the fat off the areas that you lost if you go back to eating carbohydrates. So a lot of people get afraid of eating carbohydrates and they stay in this perpetual sort of weight loss. They stay in like second gear. They can never get out of second gear. For many, the weight that they gained in disproportionate ways was due to stress. It was due to poverty, eating subpar foods. It was due to lack of sleep. If you've taken care of a lot of these, you're not going to gain weight back in the same fashion that you did initially to become out of balance. For instance, I gained a lot of fat around my chest area, but that's not a typical place in the past where I would put on such a large amount of fat. It had to do with me being obese, which was anything above, 30 BMI, and I was probably closer toward around 35 BMI. So going into that second stage of obesity. And once you're too outside your range, you will start to put on weight in an unorthodox way where your body has never done that before. And once those fat cells are primed, once they're ripe for storage, and you're on this insulin spiking roller coaster, and you just keep going back little by little, the smallest things, such as a lack of exercise, lack of mobility, and cheaper foods, corn syrups, things like this, your brain is going to require a certain number of carbohydrates to function properly and to feel at ease, to feel in balance, and your body doesn't really care. Your body isn't really aware until you're up and you're trying to walk around with 250, 260 pounds and you're going, I can't even walk half a mile. That's where I had gotten to for a while. Now I can go walk 8, 10 miles, no problem. 3.5, 4 miles is really nothing to me. I don't even really feel it afterwards. So I think walking is probably the most benign and easiest way to burn off the fat, but that in conjunction with the carbohydrate restricting diet is a necessity. Now the carnivore is going to get you down there initially, but there is a breaking point where you're starting to get back into those territories that you remember. Maybe it was in your teens, maybe it was in your early 20s, and your metabolism wasn't completely broken at that time. You knew that if you pushed it a little bit further and, stayed about the exercise and the adherence to just watching what you ate, things are going to get ugly. Maybe you had a baby. Maybe, you had to take care of somebody in your family that was ill or sick, and you could no longer focus on those personal parameters that you need to get back to as soon as you possibly can, because this is your health. Well, once you get it back into that area, in my opinion, that's when you want to start incorporating cycling your carbohydrates. Eat big, at least once a week. Carb yourself up. That's when you're going to be storing all those nutrients. That's when, you have this opportunity to hack your cells. Some might refer to it, kind of like autophagy, where you've got, cell growth occurring, regeneration. But really, the simpler way to think about it is you're going through your fuel tank. And the healthier you get, the more you're going to need to, with the human body, not with cars, get to the bottom of that fuel tank to where you are minus. You're actually having to, oxidize and go into ketosis in order to produce those calories. Once you've done that and you've hit rock bottom, and you can't go anymore, and like I say, I think it usually takes about a week if you're doing this right. That is, you're easing into the exercise. You're walking a few times a week, you're ramping up on the intensity of that or the duration. For me, I do really well off long distance walking. I like to run, I like to lift weights, I like to do those things, but that's not necessarily going to make me leaner. Down the road, once you're at your ideal body composition, that's when you want to not be afraid of eating carbohydrates, but start to take in those carbohydrates with a specific purpose, and that is to fuel your bout of exercise. And that's when you start to gauge how many carbohydrates am I going to need in order to go about this activity. Now, what a lot of people get wrong when they start to eat carbohydrates is you need to get back into the nutritional state of being fed. To equate this just to one food, an entire box of cereal, depending on the fiber content, a whole large pizza will barely, from a completely carbohydrate depleted state, will barely even, because of the thermogenic aspects that occurred, the thermic effect of food, one large pizza is barely going to scratch the surface on replenishing those glycogen stores. And this is the beauty of it, because you're going to have to get used to taking in an abundance of carbohydrates. Now, if you do want to manipulate this and you take in more fiber, that's where it might take you 1 to 3 days to be able to actually get back into a full glycogen mode. So you're depleting, you're storing. You're depleting, you're storing. Now, when you store, you want to take in a little bit extra nutrients. You don't have to go overboard, but this is a great time to take in your minerals, trace minerals. This is a good vitamin, like your vitamin D3 levels, your vitamin D levels. Taking in fat solubles, healthy nutrients within your cell. That would be considered super compensation from a nutritional standpoint. You don't want to think in this sort of static sort of way. If you're going on a VLCD or an LCD, a very low calorie diet, a low calorie diet, and you do nothing else, don't expect big results. Don't expect to have the body that you're dreaming of. You're going to need to go more extreme than that on both levels, where you go, like I said, you hit the bottom of the tank. You might only take in 500 calories, but you're not really counting those calories. You're counting those scoops of protein or the lean meat that you're taking in without any fats. There's a time where you bolster fats. There's a time where you limit the fat intake and don't take in any fats at all. There's a time where you take in an abundance of carbohydrates that are going to rapidly replenish your cells. And this, unfortunately, is based around a really hectic work week for most people, or a hectic lifestyle. In order to get back into that balance, you need to try and figure out when you can do these things. Obviously, the weekend is when most people would prefer to, carb load, say on a Sunday, starting on a Saturday night. I loved to cook with the clay pot, where I would combine a lentil or bean mixture along with a rice base, and then I would layer a variety of different vegetables on top of that, and top it off with some avocado, sprouts, things like that. But I mean, there's so many foods that are on the deadly list, the hit list these days. I think it's really important to go back to the things that you really love. If you love tomatoes, make sure you get lots of that. If you like eggplant, make sure you get some of that in through the week. But as far as this whole carnivore or vegan extremism that's going on here, you can get the best of both worlds by learning to cycle your carbohydrates. Cycling your carbohydrates to the extreme, where you're exercising to the extreme to deplete, you're depleting to the extreme to hit the bottom of the gas tank, the fuel tank, so to speak, with your carbohydrate stores, with your glycogen stores. Then when you just can't do it anymore, there's a time to super compensate and take up those nutrients rapidly. And that is what you're going through when you're exercising. You're just pushing the effect of this to a more extreme level, and you're getting more extreme results. This is what professional athletes are going through all the time. This is what their training entails. And so if you want to look like a professional athlete and start to be able to perform on a higher level within your own personal life and set some goals that are things that you never thought that you might be able to attain, well, this is how you do it. You got to get your diet down right. We'll talk to you soon.